For nearly 10 years, the most powerful intelligence agency on Earth was chasing a man who left no digital trail, no phone calls, no emails, nothing. They didn't find him because of technology. They found him because of patience. And one invisible human link that finally broke. This is not the story of a raid. This is the story of how the CIA hunted a ghost and why it almost failed. For the CIA, this was supposed to be impossible. After 9/11, the United States unleashed the most aggressive intelligence hunt in modern history. Satellites scanned continents. Intercepts flooded servers. Analysts worked around the clock. Entire task forces were created with one objective: find Osama bin Laden. And yet, year after year, he remained invisible. Osama bin Laden understood something most fugitives never did. Technology would be his downfall. So he removed it completely. No phones, no radios, no emails, no digital footprint. Not even trusted messengers who stayed too long in one place. Every modern intelligence shortcut was useless against him. Inside CIA headquarters, frustration grew quietly. Reports stacked up. Leads collapsed. Informants disappeared. Every false sighting drained time, money, and political patience. This wasn't a manhunt anymore. It was a psychological war between analysts and an enemy who refused to be seen. Bin Laden stopped being a person. He became a theory. Some believed he was dead. Others believed he was hiding in tribal areas, constantly moving. A few suspected something more dangerous, that he had found permanent sanctuary, protected not by walls, but by silence. The CIA knew one thing for certain: they would never find him directly. So the strategy changed. Instead of hunting the target, they began hunting the people around the target. Drivers, couriers, shadows who moved without names. Men who never appeared in photos, but connected the invisible lines of the network. This was the moment the hunt truly began. Not with drones, not with satellites, but with old-school intelligence, patience, pattern analysis, and human behavior. Analysts stopped asking, "Where is Osama bin Laden?" They started asking a far more dangerous question: who is protecting him, and why are they still alive? Somewhere in the noise of global intelligence traffic, one name kept resurfacing. Not loudly, not clearly, but consistently enough to matter. A courier, trusted, silent, always moving, always disappearing before anyone could touch him. At the time, no one knew this man would become the most important intelligence lead of the entire war on terror. But the CIA was about to build an operation around him, an operation that would take years, cost millions, and risk everything. Because if they were wrong, the trail would go cold forever. And if they were right, it would lead them straight to the one place no one was looking. The courier wasn't important because of who he was. It was important because of what he didn't do. He never used a phone. He never stayed in one place too long. He never revealed his real name. For years, fragments about him appeared inside CIA reports like loose threads, too weak to pull, too consistent to ignore. Analysts noticed something strange. Whenever this courier was active in a region, senior Al-Qaeda figures suddenly became unreachable. When he disappeared, the network went silent. This wasn't coincidence. This was design. The CIA began reconstructing his life backward. They didn't chase his location. They chased his patterns. How long he stayed in one area, which roads he avoided, which cities he never entered. Every absence mattered as much as every presence. Slowly, a profile formed. This courier was trusted at the highest level. He wasn't a messenger. He was a lifeline. If he was alive, it meant the leadership was alive. If he moved carefully, it meant the target was nearby. Years passed like this. Quiet work. No headlines. No raids. Just analysts watching, waiting, arguing over pixels and timelines. Political pressure mounted. Wars changed. Administrations changed. But this one operation never stopped. Then something broke the pattern. The courier began making regular trips, not random, not scattered. Regular. That was the mistake. CIA surveillance teams noticed he always returned to the same general area, an area no one expected. Not a cave, not a tribal compound. Not a remote mountain. A city. Worse, a quiet city. The logic didn't make sense. High-value fugitives didn't hide in plain sight, especially not in a populated area, close to military infrastructure. It violated every assumption the intelligence community had relied on for a decade. But intelligence doesn't follow assumptions. It follows evidence. The CIA escalated carefully. No sudden moves. No noise. Satellite coverage increased. Human observation tightened. What they found raised more questions than answers. A large compound, high walls. No internet, no phone lines. Burned trash instead of disposal. Inside that compound, someone lived who did not want to exist. The CIA didn't declare victory. Not yet. They debated. They argued. They doubted themselves. Because if they were wrong, this would be the most embarrassing intelligence failure in history. And if they were right, it would force a decision no one wanted to rush. Analysts began asking a question that changed everything. If Osama bin Laden were alive, would he live exactly like this? The answer was terrifyingly simple. Yes. Still, proof was missing. No photo. No voice. No confirmation. Just shadows, behavior, and silence. Some called it a coincidence. Others called it the best lead they'd ever seen. Inside the CIA, the operation crossed an invisible line. This was no longer intelligence gathering. This was target validation. And once that process begins, there is no going back. Because now, the question wasn't who is inside the compound. The question was, what happens if we act, and we're wrong? And more importantly, what happens if we don't? Inside the CIA, the room changed. This wasn't excitement. This was tension. Analysts who had spent their entire careers chasing shadows suddenly found themselves staring at something solid, and that terrified them. Because solid targets demand solid decisions, and solid decisions leave no room for denial. The compound became the center of everything. Satellite passes were timed to the minute. Shadows were measured. Movement was logged. A tall figure was occasionally seen walking inside the courtyard. Never leaving, never exposed. His pace was slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial. No electronics, no visitors. No mistakes. Some analysts said it was him. Others said it couldn't be. The CIA split into camps, not politically, but psychologically. One side believed this was the cleanest intelligence lead since the end of the Cold War. The other believed it was too perfect, too obvious, too dangerous to trust. Because the consequences of being wrong were catastrophic. If the CIA struck and missed, it wouldn't just fail. It would expose sources, methods, alliances. It would destabilize a nuclear-armed region. It would rewrite global credibility. So they slowed everything down. They built a replica of the compound. They ran simulations. They asked questions nobody wanted to answer. What if he escaped? What if he wasn't there? What if he was there and survived? Every option was bad. Some were worse. Then the question moved out of Langley. The intelligence reached the highest level of power. In closed rooms, without cameras or leaks, the CIA laid out the case. Not with certainty, intelligence never offers that, but with probability. Pattern, behavior, absence, silence. The most dangerous kind of evidence. The leadership listened, asked questions, asked again. And finally, someone said what everyone was thinking, but nobody wanted to say. If this isn't him, then who are we waiting for? That's when the mission changed its name, not officially, but mentally. It was no longer about finding Osama bin Laden. It was about whether the United States was willing to act on intelligence that would never be perfect, because intelligence rarely is. The CIA prepared options. Airstrike rejected, too loud, too messy, too many unknowns. Joint operation rejected, too many variables. Then one option remained: silent, precise, unforgiving, a raid that would leave no ambiguity. If successful, there would be no debate. If unsuccessful, there would be no excuses. As planning began, secrecy tightened to a level even the CIA rarely used. Only a handful of people knew. Even fewer knew everything. Information moved in fragments, never whole. The compound remained quiet. The courier still moved. The tall figure still walked. The trash was still burned. And somewhere between doubt and resolve, the operation crossed another invisible line, from decision to commitment. Because once preparations reach this stage, there is no such thing as standing down quietly. The next step would not be analysis. It would not be debate. It would be action. And when that moment came, history would not care how hard the decision was. It would only care about the result. The approval came quietly. No speech, no applause, no dramatic declaration, just a single sentence that changed everything. Proceed. From that moment on, the operation no longer belonged to analysts or planners. It belonged to the clock. Every second now mattered. Every delay increased risk. Every mistake became irreversible. The helicopters lifted off under complete radio silence. No call signs spoken, no last-minute changes, no margin for error. They flew low dangerously, low hugging the terrain, avoiding radar, threading through mountains like shadows that knew exactly where not to exist. Inside the aircraft, no one spoke. These weren't nervous men. These were professionals conserving focus, stripping emotion down to muscle memory. Their heart rates were steady, their minds clear. Each one was a finely tuned instrument, ready to perform a symphony of controlled violence. This wasn't about patriotism or glory. It was about precision and execution. Each operator had trained for this exact scenario hundreds of times, in simulations so real they could taste the dust and feel the heat. They knew the layout of the target compound better than their own homes. As they crossed into Pakistani airspace, the mission entered its most fragile phase. If detected, there would be no explanation, no negotiation, no rescue. They were ghosts, existing outside of treaties and international law. A single blip on a radar screen, a curious glance from a villager, and the entire world could be plunged into a diplomatic crisis. This was the razor's edge, where years of intelligence gathering and technological superiority could be undone by a single, unlucky moment. The tension inside the helicopter was a living thing, a silent passenger accompanying them on their journey into the unknown. The compound appeared exactly where intelligence said it would be. High walls, darkened rooms, no movement. For a moment, just a fraction of a second, everything went wrong. One helicopter lost lift. It didn't crash loudly. It didn't explode. It dropped hard inside the compound. That sound was the line between secrecy and exposure. A sickening crunch of metal that shattered the night silence. There was no pause, no hesitation. The team moved instantly, shifting the plan in real time. This was why they trained. This was why they rehearsed failure more than success. The backup procedures activated automatically, like a machine correcting itself mid-collapse. Years of drilling for contingencies kicked in. Plan A was gone. Plan B was now in motion before the debris from the crash had even settled. Explosive charges went off-controlled, precise. Entry points opened. The night fractured into chaos. Inside, everything happened fast. Too fast for history to capture cleanly. Stairwells, hallways, doors forced open. Commands were whispered, then shouted, then gone again. Every room was cleared with ruthless efficiency. Every shadow was treated as a threat. Every step forward was calculated violence, refined to seconds. It was a fluid, deadly dance through a maze of corridors and unknown dangers. Flashes of light, the smell of cordite, the chillingly calm communication between operators, it all blended into a whirlwind of action. On an upper level, they found him. No announcement, no speech, no dramatic recognition, just confirmation. The mission reached its singular point. What happened next lasted moments but would echo for decades. The objective was achieved. There was no celebration, no victory cry, only silence, the kind that follows finality. They collected what they came for: intelligence, materials, proof. The evidence that would end speculation and begin a different kind of debate. Laptops, hard drives, documents, treasure trove of information that was more valuable than the target himself. Time was already running out. The damaged helicopter was destroyed on sight. Nothing could be left behind. No technology, no trace. What couldn't leave had to disappear. Thermite charges turned advanced military hardware into a molten ruin, erasing its secrets from the world. As the team lifted off in the remaining aircraft, the compound burned behind them, not in flames, but in consequence. They crossed back out of the airspace the same way they entered. Low, silent, unseen, and somewhere far away, in rooms that had waited for this moment for years, screens went dark. No one spoke at first, because when something you've chased for a decade finally ends, your mind needs time to catch up. The relief was not immediate. It was a slow dawn, breaking through the clouds of adrenaline and focus. The world would learn soon enough, but right now, only one thing mattered. The mission was complete, and nothing about the world would be the same again. The extraction didn't end the operation. It only ended the silence. As the helicopters disappeared into the night, the mission entered a phase no one on the ground could control anymore. What had been a covert action now became a geopolitical shockwave, moving faster than any aircraft. Inside intelligence rooms across Washington, confirmation protocols triggered one after another. DNA verification, facial recognition, materials cross-checked against years of fragmented intelligence. No assumptions, no shortcuts, only certainty. When the final confirmation came, it wasn't announced loudly. It was acknowledged quietly. Because everyone in that room understood what this meant. This wasn't just the end of a man. It was the closing of a chapter that had shaped global policy, wars, surveillance laws, and public fear for over a decade. By morning, the world woke up to a single headline. Governments reacted first, carefully, cautiously. Allies were informed through secure channels before the public ever heard the words. Militaries raised alert levels, not out of celebration, but anticipation. History had taught them that moments like this don't end tension. They redistribute it. Crowds gathered in some cities, silence fell in others. For some, it was justice. For others, it was provocation. For many, it was simply unreal. Inside Pakistan, questions surfaced immediately. Inside the U.S., debates ignited just as fast. Sovereignty, intelligence failures. How this man stayed hidden so long. How close he really was. But the operators, they disappeared back into anonymity. No interviews, no medals shown, no names released. They returned to quiet bases, quiet homes, quiet lives, carrying something no briefing could remove. Because when you stand at the center of an event that reshapes history, normal life never fully fits again. Within days, analysis replaced adrenaline. Experts dissected every second. Journalists replayed satellite images. Documentaries began forming narratives before facts had fully settled. And yet, one truth remained unchanged. This mission did not end terrorism. It did not close the book on extremism. It did not bring permanent peace. What it did was something colder and more real. It proved that time does not erase targets. That intelligence, when patient enough, eventually converges. That no shadow is permanent, but it also proved something else. That modern warfare no longer ends with parades. It ends with arguments, with doubt, with consequences that stretch far beyond the moment of action. Years later, this operation would still be studied, not just for how it was executed, but for what it revealed about the world that made it necessary. A world where wars don't always have front lines, where enemies don't wear uniforms, where victories are measured in silence, not surrender. The mission ended that night. The impact didn't, and that's why this story isn't remembered as a raid. It's remembered as a moment when history briefly held its breath and then moved forward, changed forever. History doesn't end when the operation ends. It ends when we stop asking questions. What you just watched wasn't a movie scene, and it wasn't a myth. It was a moment where intelligence, patience, and consequences collided and changed the course of modern history. But every operation has two stories, the one written in official reports and the one hidden between the lines. That's why this channel exists. If you want more real intelligence stories, real missions, and real decisions that shape the world behind closed doors, support the channel. Like this video if you felt the tension. Share it with someone who appreciates real history. Subscribe if you want more deep dive intelligence stories. Comment below. Was this operation justice, strategy, or something more complex? Your engagement keeps these stories alive. And remember, the loudest operations end in silence, but the smartest ones live forever. Disclaimer N. Any of this video is a historical and educational presentation based on publicly available information, declassified reports, journalistic investigations, and academic sources. This content does not promote violence, extremism, or hate. No classified, confidential, or restricted information is used. Events are described for educational, documentary, and analytical purposes only. All individuals, organizations, and events are referenced in a neutral, factual context. Any interpretations are intended to help viewers understand historical complexity, not to endorse actions or policies. This video complies with YouTube community guidelines and fair use principles for education, commentary, and historical analysis.